Welcome, everyone. I see there's still people coming on board, so we'll give the internet a couple of minutes. All right. Welcome to this Green Alumni event. My name is Vivian. I'm one of the founders and CPO at Green Solar Academy. And I'm happy to see that not everyone is on holidays yet. So yes, a warm welcome to all of you. We have a very interesting and very urgent topic, the sudden silence in the residential PV market and what to do about that. And I invited Lionel Kosny because he said he's got the solution. It's in the C&I market, spoiler alert. And I want to ask him all about that. Before I ask you to introduce yourself, Lionel, just a little announcement for all of you in the audience who have questions throughout the webinar. You find a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen down there. Please ask all your questions in the Q&A. Do not use the chat function because for me it's then easier to just manage all your questions in the Q&A. All right. So hi, Lionel. You join us from iseli. Maybe introduce yourself and what you do there and what your area of expertise is in a few words.
Hi, Vivian. Thanks for having me on here. So I'm the residential and commercial design engineer at iseli, as well as the regional manager for the Western Cape area. So what we've seen is a drastic decline in the residential market, and we've decided to come up with solutions to mitigate the problem. And that's what we're going to chat about today.
Can't wait, actually. But before we start, like everything good before it starts, there's a little commercial break from my side. So I have a mini presentation that I want to share with you. So there we go. Just a couple of updates. What is new at Green Solar Academy? I don't know if you know that we have an email newsletter. Our solar training update is coming out every month with information about us and new projects, new courses, any discounts. So if you want to stay up to date with regards to training, just sign up to that one. We also launched a new newsletter that is coming out once per quarter, where we ask our technology partners, such as iseli-energy, to drop all their info. So we have all the information on product training, on information on any events you should be attending, condensed in one single newsletter, so that you don't have to go through all the pages, but that you just sign up to that one and you don't miss any of the important dates. For both newsletters, you can just sign up on our website. It should be there in the footer, quite easy to find. If not, you can just contact myself or anyone of my team and they will show you how to sign up. Then 2024 is almost there, basically. So we have published all the new dates for training in 2024 on our website, the usual basic, intermediate, and advanced courses. And we are opening again with the first training courses on 16th of January in Johannesburg. with the first PV assessment, and then follows a whole lot of super solar schools, PV assessment, designer courses, compliance courses, anything you can imagine. You can check our website for the whole list, and you can start signing up. There's still early bird discounts for a lot of these courses available, so it's worth having a look. And then last topic, this is proper advertisement. Last topic is we have a new course. You've been requesting this a lot. There is a new course called the PV Assessment Prep Course. So anyone, specifically green alumni who have done a training a while ago and want to go for the PV Green Card assessment, can do this one-day course as kind of a refresher, just to touch up on the basic knowledge, what was best practice again when installing, because you know how it is over time. You make certain mistakes that the assessors don't like to see in the PV assessment. So we've got this one-day course with theoretical and a practical share, where we just update you on everything and prepare you as best as we can to pass the PV Green Card assessment. First course is taking place in Johannesburg next year, 22nd of February. You find the date and the registration on the website, so just go there and have a look. As alumni, of course, you get also a discount on that course. Good, and that's it on the commercial break. All the information always on our website available, but I don't want to talk about that anymore. We have lots of questions to ask. We already had a pre-chat, Lionel and I, and yeah, I think time is going to be quite short. So let's dive right in. What about the residential market? I mean, we all know it is kind of, it feels dead. What happened there? What is the situation, Lionel?
So there was a drastic reduction in load shedding the last couple of months, and we thought that this would be the main reason for the decline in the residential industry, although it's not the only decline. We had an oversupply of PV in the beginning of the an undersupply of PV in the beginning of the year, and an over demand, and that was good for business. It stimulated, and a lot of people joined the industry just for the sake of knowing that they can make some money. So a lot of the joiners didn't realize that the market would become oversaturated as fast as it did. Then all of a sudden the load shedding dried up, and all of a sudden our market got flooded with equipment from all over the world. So we have an oversupply and an under demand, and that basically almost killed the residential industry completely. Most of the guys in the industry are aware of this, and a lot of businesses basically almost had to close their doors. Some people did close their doors. So is it completely dead? I would say no, it's not dead. There's also a cash strain. So a lot of people don't have the means to go on a cash-based system. But if load shedding goes up to something like stage 6, normally it forces people to generate cash magically. I don't know how, but that does stimulate business a bit, but not the way it was in the beginning of 2023. So we have to shift the strategy now to keep everyone busy and the country going forward. That's my take on the residential industry at the moment.
Yeah, sounds like it. I think we also, it's part of our fault as well, because so many installers focused on that load shedding as marketing strategy. And then if you haven't built a proper relationship with your customers, then if there's no load shedding, there's no need for them to buy anymore. Yeah,
that's true.
Okay. How is it different? You say in the commercial and industrial market, there is still potential. How is that different from the residential? I mean, load shedding also happens there. Why doesn't it impact the C&I market as much?
No, I would say that load shedding does impact the C&I market, but load shedding is not the driving factor for C&I business. It's never been. So C&I business has always been about protecting revenue and to reduce costs. That is the main focus. So whether you do that with a grid-tied system and a generator, that's one option, or whether you do that with a hybrid system by using lithium batteries as storage as another option, it boils down to the same thing. Big businesses and small businesses are trying to protect themselves against high cost of electricity as well as load shedding. The problem is in South Africa, the price of diesel has gone up significantly, and that is why lithium storage is now becoming a more viable option than having OPEX of high diesel on a regular basis. It's becoming a tug of war now. Some people still tend to lean towards grid tied with genset. Other people lean towards hybrid with storage. So that's where the market now is starting to get busy, with more and more businesses moving towards getting either off the grid or as close as possible, or at least protecting themselves against load shedding, because everybody knows it's not going to go away soon.
Yeah, sounds like the companies in general, or like commercial customers, think more long term than the residential sector. Is that a reason why it's more stable for a PV installer to be in that commercial space?
Yes, I would believe so. And each company has a drive to grow. So if an installer is active within a certain circle of companies, as these companies either procure other companies or grow and expand and open more branches, they will be called back for subsequent business continually, on a continual basis. A lot of the companies also say, let's start with a phase 1, and then there'll be a phase 2 and a phase 3. With a residential install, it never works like that. Normally, the guys put in a system and it's done. On the bigger commercial installations, the install itself is not actually where the joy starts. The joy starts once the system is installed. Then you have your O&M contracts and your maintenance contracts, and it's a 25-year journey. It's a completely different ballgame.
Yeah, okay. So that sounds like the installer definitely has to adapt when doing the switch from residential to C&I market. Before we speak about that in detail, any trends that you can predict for next year? What is going to happen to the residential market, and how is the C&I market going to develop? I know
the residential industry, I think, is going to pick up again slightly because load shedding is back with a bang, and I think it's going to be a continual problem based on what I've read in the newspapers and with some knowledge in the industry. I think 2024 is going to look similar to 2023 in terms of load shedding. So the residential game will go on. The problem is there's an oversupply of low quality equipment in the market, and it seems that now everybody has gone in a price war. So it's a race to the bottom. If everybody's fighting over R5, and that is a problem that we tend to see in the residential sector. On the commercial side, we tend to see that people want to focus on quality equipment. They want to do business with qualified installers, people who've got proper training, that have a reputation, because they think long term and they have more knowledge about what they want to do with their money. A lot of residential people are easily fooled and easily told, but this is the way, and they're none the wiser. They don't know any better. And a lot of people are taken advantage of and scammed. But in the C&I market, it's not so easy to scam someone, because normally the guys that actually give you the signature for the payment, they do their homework.
Yeah.
So that's the difference. And I think the trend in the C&I also, because the equipment is now very affordable due to the oversupply, businesses are looking at this as a very viable investment at the moment, because low cost of install versus 2023, beginning 2022, price structure. And they know that the situation with the power in the country is worsening. So if it's in the C&I, a really good time to invest in renewable energy would be right now.
Yeah, that's quite reassuring to hear that the strategy to actually install quality and like rely on quality components and do the job right really pays off. Because I think if you, as a company, decide to still stay in the residential sector, you have your customers, you have your network, and you have the word of mouth that's like working for you still. You're not one of those bad installers. And then when you move to the C&I market, you don't really have to change your attitude. So you still, like, quality actually pays off, and that's what customers are looking for. What else?
Absolutely.
Seems like you know the residential, the commercial market quite well. What would you say? What else are commercial customers looking for? You said quality products, and you said they do their homework. So how is it different? What are their expectations?
Well, I think it's a question of it's an investment. So in the residential market, people generally want to get away from load shedding. That's the goal. So when that problem goes away, they've achieved their goal. In business, it's about the return on investment. So when you have other people work with large sums of money, because commercial installations tend to cost more, it's larger sums of money, you tend to do your homework better. So they would be looking typically for guys that have got PV green cards. They would be looking for qualified electricians. They would be looking for bigger companies such as EPCs or large reputable installers. So that is where the transition comes in. How do you transition from residential, which is a quiet market, to the C&I market? One of the ways would obviously be to get your qualifications and your certifications in place. Another way is to take hands with a business partner that will help you grow, which is going to help you show you how to design, how to simulate, and help you design a full system for your first couple of installs so that you can get to the point where you'll be able to do this on your own successfully and hopefully grow into an EPC as time goes by.
Yeah. In order to see who's here, I have a little poll which I'll launch right now. So everyone in the audience, you see a little pop-up window now on your screen where you can answer a couple of questions for us. So then we see who's here, whether you're about to join the C&I market or whether you're already active. And then we can shape the questions a little. Yeah, so, but also in our little pre-chat the other day, you said that the mindset that commercial customers have is also different. Like the residential customer sees solar as an expense. They have to do it. They don't like spending cash, but they want the energy. And then system is bought and then they start just using it. And for the commercial customer, it's a bit different. They see it as a business asset. How's that view different?
So since business works on a profit model, the more your overheads are, the less profit you make. So the idea of business is to keep the costs as low as possible. Now, if you can get your electricity as close to free as possible by using renewable energy such as PV power, you are busy reducing your overheads, thereby your business is more profitable. If you have two businesses standing right next to each other doing the same thing, providing customers with the same product, one is running off solar power and the other one is running off Eskom power, I can tell you that there's an 80% chance that the business running off solar power will, in the first place, be able to offer the same product at a better price. And the customers will feel better because the power will be on all of the time. They will be able to offer more product because there won't be downtime in their production. So as a business, it absolutely makes sense in terms of security and in terms of your overhead costs to install renewable energy. That's why businesses adopt it easily. And they also look at it as a tax write-off. So what you can do is, seeing as you need power to run your business and seeing as you need to mitigate the actual physical cost or the capex which they need to take out to install this, would qualify for a tax deduction in certain instances. And that is a further benefit to businesses, whereby residential customers don't claim back on tax. And their return on investment is generally longer because they have very little amount of PV and a lot of storage, because the main game is just to run away from load shedding, which is fine for residential. But in C&I, the idea is to install a large amount of PV, because most businesses, well, I would say the larger majority of businesses run during daytime hours when you have your PV available. So there would be more PV, less storage. It's a different model, and it just works out with a much shorter return on investment time than a residential install.
Yeah, okay. It sounds like there's quite a mind shift needed, and maybe some upskilling also among installers who are moving into the commercial space, because you need to be aware of all of that. You need to use different language. You need to use different arguments when speaking to a commercial customer then. But let's move maybe into the more technical questions, because I know that that's what everyone is asking for. By the way, to our audience, remember the Q&A button down here. If you have any questions on the way, please drop them there, and then I can ask Lionel either on the go or at the end. So you said, or we boldly said in the headline, especially low voltage solutions are relevant for the C&I market. Do you have a statement for that?
Yes. So there's various factors which make it a better investment at this point in time. So firstly, the low voltage solutions would be suitable for installations below 0.5 megawatt, especially for installations below 250 kilowatts. So when you start going 250 to 0.5 megawatt, it becomes sort of even with high voltage. And when you go further than 500 kilowatt systems, I myself would rather opt for the high voltage systems, purely due to things like cable thickness and space required for certain things. Balance of system, extremely huge. However, I see that the market now, everybody is running to high voltage and everybody just wants to do high voltage. And that's a propaganda which has very successfully been implemented. So the market has now been flooded with high voltage equipment, but they don't really understand what the pros and cons of this is. So what we've noticed is that the inverters, yes, are much more affordable, and people just look at the cost of the inverter and say, no, high voltage system is more affordable, but it's not. The cost of the storage is nearly double that of low voltage, and there's no redundancy. So how you get to high voltage, you put everything in series, and when everything is connected in series, it's like a chain. If one of the links in the chain breaks, you don't have a chain anymore. So your battery stacks, if one battery dies out, the whole battery stack is dead. Or if your BMU dies out, the whole battery stack is dead. So you've got zero redundancy. You've got one inverter. If something goes wrong with one inverter and it switches off, the entire business switches off. Ironically enough, the high voltage systems start out in the 20 kilowatt upwards region, which means we are moving into the commercial space with the high voltage systems. Now, as you move into the commercial space, you would generally be doing these installations for businesses that want to keep the doors open during load shedding. They cannot afford downtime. So if you install equipment for, let's say, a shop or a restaurant or a filling station that has little to no redundancy, and something goes wrong and the whole system dies out, your customer is going to lose money and your customer is going to be angry with you. That's why we tend to love the low voltage systems a lot more, because if one battery in a bank of 10 batteries in a parallel system dies out, you will be notified by your customer, one of my batteries has got an issue, but the system will still run perfectly. So business can continue, your customer continue to make money, and that gives you an opportunity to go and rectify the situation. Whereas with high voltage, this is not the case.
Yeah, now that sounds like quite an advantage, actually. But why is that trend for high voltage? Is it purely pushed by the manufacturers, or are there also advantages why somebody should decide for high voltage?
There are advantages to high voltage, but from my side, I would say that it's pushed from the manufacturers mostly. Manufacturers decide to bring something new into the country, they will bring it in by the tens of thousands. And if the equipment is sitting there, the equipment needs to be moved. It's a financial model. So that would be then said to their customers, hey, this is the next best thing. This is the amazing thing. And I'm not saying it's bad. High voltage systems are fine, but the redundancy is a massive problem. And the other thing is that there are very few vendors out there that provide high voltage batteries at this point in time. You do find them. There are a few vendors, but there are a few vendors. And that's the problem. With low voltage, you have a very large array of storage options to choose from. And that would mean that you have a lot shorter turnaround time if something goes wrong and you need to have stock swapped out. You have a lot more stock available in the country. We've noticed with some of the high voltage systems that stock can become a problem very quickly. You can find certain items, but not other items. And without these items, the systems just won't work.
Yeah, and then you have two bottlenecks. You have like the supply chain, plus you have the risk that if the system fails, it's gone. And then not just the system is gone, but also your reputation as a company, probably. What about safety aspects? Because high voltage, I mean, it is dangerous. So what are your thoughts about the safety question?
Yeah, so human safe DC voltage has been deemed as 36 volts. So ironically, 48 volt systems are above that, but that is very close to 36 volts. That would be your general low voltage system would be between 40 and 60 volts. And your general high voltage system would be between 500 and 800 volts DC. So that is, in the first place, it's a lot less safe to handle. It's a lot less safe to install. You need insulated gloves. You need proper insulated shoes. There's a lot of things that are compulsory when installing high voltage, which you can get away with not having if you install low voltage. For example, hot swapping, you cannot hot swap a DC battery, high voltage DC battery. You have to completely shut down the system. Whereas with a low voltage battery, by bypassing it, by disconnecting the fuse or whatever the case may be, you could actually hot swap a battery live. If you happen to touch the cables, even with your bare hands, nothing's going to happen to you. So customers like that because you don't have to switch their system off while their business is operating in the background, and you can change some equipment. It doesn't work in all the cases, but in high voltage is completely not possible.
Yeah, sounds like quite an advantage because most installers, I would assume, are used to the low voltage systems, and since that's what many have been doing in the residential space anyway. So then stepping up from the small residential systems to mid to bigger size commercial systems isn't such a change. So what brands and manufacturers are out there for the low voltage commercial size? Is it exactly the same range as for the residential, or which brands and manufacturers can you recommend?
So remember earlier I mentioned that it's good to partner with somebody that can help you with the designs and to help you get your business started. So what we've done, we've put together packages consisting of SunSync inverters. We specifically tend to focus on the 12 kilowatt three-phase machine as opposed to using single-phase machines to get to three-phase. That's also a redundancy aspect. We've paired this with the NSL 10.24 kilowatt-hour battery. The NSL batteries are 1C charge and discharge, and they give us a 99% depth of discharge as well. So you basically get the full 10 kilowatts. Now, in comparison with, for example, if I had to go for a SunSync high voltage system, I would be on a 0.5C, which means I would have to install double the amount of batteries. Why is this relevant in commercial? Because it's specifically in commercial that you find things like inverse currents, induction motors. And when these things start up, they use a lot of power. And if you're on 0.5C, you might run into a problem where your system would trip out and not work. Another thing I also didn't mention about the high voltage is, by law in South Africa, you're not allowed to install a high voltage system if you're not a qualified red seal electrician. A lot of customers don't know this, and they go and they install the systems and they commission and they switch it on, and neither the installer nor the customer is none the wiser. However, if something does go wrong, or you need to register with certain municipalities, you have to register. They don't accept the registrations if you don't have the proper qualifications, and also the insurance companies don't pay out if something goes wrong, if it was not installed by a qualified installer or certified installer. Another aspect of the low voltage, which is better.
Yeah, okay, no, very important aspect. I mean, especially because we're having that whole safety and who can install discussion at the moment. Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned as brands, you mentioned SunSync, but then earlier you said commercial customers look out for quality. And I mean, SunSync is not bad. They must be doing something right, but it's not top-notch product, and it's not like the super expensive quality. How does that match?
So when you enter the commercial space, you have a bracket in between, say, 20 kilowatts and 150 kilowatts. I would recommend that somebody who's moving from residential and is used to installing SunSync and Daya products and Lux Power products, that they would move towards using something which they're familiar with and building up a larger system with that which they are familiar with. So obviously, when they've done a few of these systems and they've got built a reputation in the commercial and industrial industry, they could move to different tier brands such as Huawei, or they could move to iseli-energy, or they could move to something like SMA or Fronius. So they are definitely much more commercially viable brands where you can build larger systems. For example, with Huawei, at this point in time, you can go up to 3 megawatts. With iseli-energy, by end of 2024, you'll be able to go up to 3 megawatts. There's ATES. There's a lot of competitors out there which work well, but are, in the first place, it's a larger financial outlay. Whereas with the sensing systems, they're actually quite affordable if they're designed correctly. The redundancy is good, and what's nice about using something like the sensing system is there's a lot of stock available. So the market has been flooded with stock, and there's a lot of stock in South Africa. Certain installations, if you go for Huawei or you go for ATES or whatever the case may be, you need to import, and you have to wait 6 weeks for the import to come in. So there are advantages to using the sensing. Myself personally, anything above 250 kilowatts, I would definitely rather opt for the higher quality equipment, larger blocks, building blocks. I wouldn't want to build with 12 kilowatt blocks such a large system. I would rather look for something like 100 kilowatts or 250 kilowatt blocks, so you use less equipment to get to a megawatt. But I think that's a different ballgame to what I'm addressing. I'm addressing small CNI, entry level, say 20 kilowatt to 150 kilowatt space would be perfect for the low voltage solutions.
Yeah, no, makes sense. Makes definitely sense. And I see in the poll that many of you answered that you are not yet in the commercial space, but you want to start or have done a few installations. So yeah, I guess it does make sense. I mean, you don't start with a megawatt project. You like slowly work your way up, and then it matches also the size of the system matches the size of the company who buys it, and then the whole argumentation to use a sensing really makes sense. Are there any design rules that apply to commercial systems that are different from the commercial sector that we should look out for?
So there are rules that apply to all installations, and your residential customers wouldn't always know to look out for these things, and you'd get away with cutting corners much easier in the residential game. So I can tell you that cutting corners in a commercial installation is not only stupid, it could be in the end of your new business venture. So it's very important to do everything by the book. That is why iseli offers the design for you service, where we provide them with a single line diagram, and we offer telephonic on-site commission assistance. There's a lot of assistance that we provide in designing the roof, the mounting structure, and specifically making sure that this fits in with the structural engineer's reports. I think when you work residential, it's very easy to stop and install and get in your vehicle and drive off. In commercial, you have to make sure that the building can handle the weight of the array. You have to make sure that you are allowed to install. Maybe your customer is a tenant, maybe it's not his own property. Does the landlord allow for installation? What are the local regulations in terms of solar? Are you allowed to install 100% of your breaker size? Are you allowed to install 60% of your breaker size? Do you plan to export power? There's a lot of questions to ask which might not be so important in residential, which become vital in a commercial. As well as in a commercial sector, your customer clearly needs to tell you, what does he or she want to achieve? Do you want to achieve savings? Do you want to have backup for load shedding? Do you want to sell power to the grid? What is your plan with your investment? Because we could design the same system in 6 different ways and get 6 different outcomes on the same building. So yes, it's a different ballgame altogether, but it's very exciting and very rewarding.
What role does it play? What kind of business it is? Like whether it's like just business in offices or manufacturing? I mean, obviously it does play a role, but what are the differences looking at it from the design perspective? What questions should you be asking about the type of business?
So, for example, if it's a 9 to 5 type, or 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the afternoon type of business, in general, you would get away with pretty much only PV panels with a grid-tied system. However, now with the advent of a lot of load shedding, you would put a little bit of storage just to keep your system alive, or you could put a small diesel genset just to keep the system alive so that it can generate power even during load shedding. because the office doesn't have occupants at night when there's no PV power. You don't really need to put a lot of storage. However, if it's a manufacturing business, a lot of manufacturing businesses run for 24 hours. And when they run for 24 hours, you would need to put a lot of storage or have a diesel generator up and running, or some wind power that can also be integrated because it's more windy at night, in order to help them cope with the loads at night and during the daytime. So your load profile would consist of a lot of load shifting. You would try to farm as much PV during the day and store it so that you can use it at night. But you'd have to put a lot of PV because you can't only farm for your storage, but you have to farm for your loads as well. That's the one aspect. And then obviously you need to look at what the business is doing. If your business, for example, has a lot of computers, laptops that just stand on the whole day, your load profile would be very sort of like almost like a straight line. Whereas if you have a manufacturing business that has, example, maybe a lot of motors starting up, then you would have a very busy line, and you need to look at what are the inverse currents and which motors start up. And like specifically a filling station is a very good example of this, because you have 36 pumps, and 36 pumps randomly start up at the same time. Sometimes you have 3 or 4 pumps firing at the same time. And these pumps, they fire up to 2,000-3,000 times per day per pump. And every time a pump starts up from zero, it has a spike. And that is how filling stations work. That's the nature of their business. They pump. And then when they're done pumping, the pump switches off. The next car stops there, it starts again. That's just by nature, that's the design of the business. So such a filling station would need a much larger system than a business which uses the same amount of power, but, for example, only uses laptops and telephones, something with a more stable power consumption.
So that sounds like an energy assessment is definitely an integral part of the whole design process. It's like
absolutely.
You go with the energy meters and you properly analyze the load profile. How do you go about inefficiency? Like, do you do energy assessments and then also consult the customer first? Because I mean, there's a lot you can save in the size of your system when you just optimize a little. Do all the machines need to be switched on at the same time, or can I shave that peak? Do you do that as well? Does that become the job of the PV installer too?
So that's when it becomes interesting. So as a residential installer, you would generally come in, install and go, and the customer would say, I need to back up my loads.
Yeah.
In a commercial, you can come in and you can say, okay, your load is, for example, 100 kilowatts. However, you've got fluorescent lights. If you can change these fluorescent lights to LED lights, and then there's an extra business opportunity for you, so you can do the same. We can reduce your load from 100 kilowatts to 80 kilowatts, right? So 100 kilowatt PV system is going to cost you this, and 80 kilowatt system is going to cost you that. However, for me to retrofit all your fittings with LED lights is going to cost you this. Then you can show your customer on paper the difference between reducing the one and installing the smaller PV system versus installing the larger PV system. And then if it's financially viable, your customer sees that you're not just in it to make money, but you're in it to save them as well. And in the commercial sector, that is something we look for a lot. We look, for example, are these guys, some places like golf courses have massive pumps that run for their irrigation. And we tend to tell them, so rather fill up your dams at night when the people are not playing golf. And then so there's load shifting involved. Every single situation is a bit different. Hospitals have a different profile to malls, have a different profile to shopping centers and takeaway places. Each one has its own load profile, which needs to be taken into account.
Yeah. Wow. So in the commercial sector, I mean, it's so complex. So it really shifts from in residential, the main work is probably convincing the customer to buy and then installing the system, because the installation, the planning is like something you have and something you apply for every customer. 5 kilowatt PV, same storage, the system is what you have. But then for commercial, is all those little adjustments you need to make, and that analysis. How much would you estimate? How much makes that analysis and that design process in the overall time that the project takes?
That would be dependent on the size of the project. If it's let's say if it's under 500 kilowatts and it's a single property, it's not a group that you're doing, you could do your analysis in about a week. If it's a really large, something like a solar farm, or if it's a mine or a large, like a mall that uses 2 megawatts, it takes quite a bit of effort. You have some, like specifically in the agricultural sector, you have some places which have a lot of feed-in points that don't use a single feed-in point. And so you need to analyze each and every system individually, and then you need to figure out how you're going to integrate all of these systems as one, whilst not integrating them from the Eskom side. And another thing which is awesome about the commercial sector is you don't only allow yourself to work in the PV space, but you open up for things like wind generation and biomass and all these other renewable technologies coming in, which is great. And then another thing which also really makes a big difference is the ability to add finance to a deal. So iseli also can help its customers arranging finance for the end users, but on a commercial scale, not on a residential scale. We can also help with financing a deal from the installer's perspective, and in the residential space, this becomes a problem. Whereas in the commercial space, this becomes a necessity. In the residential space, we find a lot of guys say, you know, you give us a 70% deposit, and the 30% when we're done, or a similar ratio. Whereas in the commercial space, a lot of time we say that the guy should give a 10% deposit and then they give the balance when you're done. And you think, but how am I going to afford R1 million worth of equipment? Well, iseli can help the customer with that. So there is bridging finance where we finance the equipment for the time period of the installation, or 30 days or whatever the contract is we sign on. And then the customer gets paid by his customer, and it gets facilitated by a third party so that we get our cut and he gets his cut and everybody's happy. And that you don't really find in the residential space too much.
Yeah, no, not really. But that actually, that 100% confirms what I discussed last time in the alumni meeting when I had Paige Brown from UPSA here, and she said most of the commercial deals are actually bank financed. So for the installer, financial literacy to understand the feasibility calculations and to like talk to the customer on that level is necessary. You can't get a job when you can't put together those numbers because your customer needs them. So yeah, and it's good to know, or actually, yeah, it's necessary and super helpful when companies like iseli are there to support customers who don't have that level of experience yet, and then kind of provide the support on the way. But then, yeah, the basic knowledge you need to acquire yourself. Maybe in our one-day PV finance course. Yeah,
like a good plan.
we have that exactly for that purpose, because customers moving up there actually need to know what all those terms mean and how to put together the calculations. I have one more technical question, and if anyone in the audience has questions, you can also put them in the Q&A field. I will dedicate a bit of time at the end to answer all your questions that have been coming in. One last technical question. What about generator integration? Because load shedding has been going on, so I assume lots of businesses and companies have generators, diesel generators in place already. How do you deal with that? Integrate, replace? What are the challenges when adding PV to that?
I would recommend, if possible, to keep a generator if you already have it, unless you have a buyer for that. So it also depends. Some companies rent a generator on a long-term 5-year or 7-year contract from a vendor. Some of them are standing cash, but they're in a really good condition. They haven't worked a lot, although now with load shedding, they probably have worked a lot. So what happens is a generator generally switches on and it carries all of your loads. So you will find that it revs hard and it burns a lot of diesel. So if you have a genset and you don't want to get rid of the genset at this point in time, you can add PV to the installation as a grid-tied setup. The grid-tied PV will carry the bulk of the loads. Grid-tied inverter does not work if there's no grid. So the generator would replace the grid, but it wouldn't carry the load. So now the generator can idle at a much lower capacity. The motor's running slower, therefore it burns a lot less diesel, and that brings down the cost of running the generator. However, if you want to completely eliminate the cost, I think somebody can make a lot of money if they bring in an exchange system where they would start up a business where they could say, we will financially get rid of your generator for you and barter it for lithium storage, and that's going to cost you X amount. So I think that is not a service which is greatly available, but each installer has the ability to tell their customers, and I can get you a buyer for your generator for 50,000 Rand. Your batteries are going to cost you 75,000 Rand, so you just have to pay 25,000. We will offset the generator's fee. Then in that case, it's better to get the lithium because it's a once-off cost, it's a capex, and then it's done. Whereas with even if we just do grid tied without storage and we use the genset, it still burns diesel. It's burning less, but it's still a cost. It depends on how much money the end user has access to as well. Everyone doesn't have access to certain amounts of financing. But they have a problem now, which needs to be addressed now. Some guys don't want to do finance; they want to work out of their own budget. Every customer is unique. That's why you need a partner to help you with the first 3 or 4 jobs, so you can sort of get the hang of how it's done in the commercial space.
Yeah. How far does that service go from iseli? What do you do? If I have my first commercial project now, how much do you help me?
So we can help the newbies, especially with the low voltage systems, because it's something we really want to try and push into the market. We can help you guys with single line diagrams. We help you with commissioning assistance. We help you with engineering drawings. We help you with your engineering report, and we can also get your professional engineering sign off on the install, as well as the structural engineering report for the roof to see if. So there's 2 engineering reports for the roof. The one is on your PV mounting system, and the other one is on the roof. And these 2 need to chat to each other in order to be legally signed off. We will then also supply you with a document pack that consists of your warranties and your PV serial numbers and all these things you need to fill in your PV green card, and also the questionnaire that you need to tick off and see which blocks you need to tick in order to have your system 100% in place, ready to be accepted by your local municipality if you need to register the system. So we also offer training, and we partner with proper training facilities like Green Solar, which offer proper training, and all this training together with these packages that become, so people can come and see us, we can consult with them, and that will get the guys up and running. We also design your mounting structure for you. We will assist in designing the system capacity, telling you, okay, you need this amount of inverters with this amount of solar PV, this amount of storage. And in general, if it's not a very complicated site where you need to install loggers and get a very complicated usage assessment, we would be able to do that quite accurately in a single consultation, purely due to experience and this whole system we've built. So it's a more modular approach.
That sounds very comfortable for an installer. Is that full service ongoing, or is that just for the first couple of projects?
No, we could keep it ongoing. So at the moment we have these low voltage solutions. So we've built them into blocks. There's a block of 25, to a block of 50, a block of 100, and a block of 150 kilowatt systems. So the 25, for example, comes with 25 kilowatts of storage, or 50 or 75. And the 50 comes with 50 or 100 or 150. And the 150 comes with 100, 150 and 200 kilowatt hours of storage. So there's basically 9 pre-built kits. So as a part of the kit, we will do all of this without cost to help the guy. So if it's on a different system, if you come to me and you ask me, you want to do a Huawei Luna system, we're going to help you with a Huawei Luna system, but not to the same extent that we will do with this system, because it's just a different. We are really trying to push these packages into the market, and that's why we incentivize that by offering a lot of these assistance mechanisms for the installers. at no cost to them.
Yeah, no, it makes sense to kind of have packages and try to standardize the most common sizes. I mean, that's what we've been doing in the residential sector, and it worked quite well. But then, even though commercial is more complex, I think the size ranges and the packages can still work quite well with some adjustments. Before I ask some more about what skills, or before we summarize what skills an installer should get, we want to know what's in it. Can you tell us how does the profit look like for a PV installer in a residential project versus a commercial project? How's the cost structure there?
So what installers tend to do is installers tend to put a profit on equipment, and they charge an installation fee. So let's hypothesize that the percentage which you put on equipment and the percentage that you charge on the installation fee remain the same. Then I would say that in the residential space, your standard system would be in the region of 100 to 250,000 rand for an install to the end user. That would be the norm. There are more affordable installs and there are bigger and more expensive installs. In your commercial space, a really small install would be around 500,000. Your norm would rather be around 1 million to 2 million rand for your normal entry level or small CNI system. So if you use those same percentages on both, you're looking at a lot larger volume of cash you can generate for yourself and for your business as an installer. But you're going to work for that, because now you have to do all this research, and you have to do a feasibility study, and you have to register the system for SSEG, and you have to have engineering reports. So you will work for that, but it's a more lucrative zone to work in, I would say, than the residential segment.
Yeah, but it sounds like it's like a quite rewarding environment. Like if you're working properly anyway, and you follow all the rules and you did all the registrations, you just do it at a bit larger scale, but the procedures you already have in your business, and then you just do it for more profit. It sounds like quite an attractive market. And actually, yeah, while I did a bit of research, all the articles said like the potential for South Africa is really in the CNI market. So residential is there, but then CNI, there was a number that mentioned 500 gigawatts, which is massive. If we look at, I think they mean the overall capacity, it can't be just CNI. But if we look at what is installed currently, which is a total of 5.7 gigawatts. So, I mean, that is where we're going. That's how much business we still have. Okay, I have already some questions. First one is, I would like to know how to manage a construction site at this level and do project management on CNI projects. Can you give me some pointers?
I would say that if you want to do project management at this level and you have not got any project management experience, you could do a project management short course or a project management online course. That would give you some pointers on how to do project management. Another thing you could do is to get involved with an existing CNI project and shadow the guys doing that, maybe for 2 or 3, and then you would see what it's all about. I would not jump into a project of this size all by yourself right from the start. If by some miracle you happen to get the job, which you probably won't if you don't know how to pitch it, there's a very good chance that you could sink the job, and that could sink your reputation. And unfortunately, in the commercial sector, if you overload a roof and it collapses and it kills 100 people, you will go to jail. So you will want to do what you do correctly. So it's very good to see the enthusiasm, and we can definitely recommend a lot of ways. But the first thing is that I think to start off to get some sort of a project management certification, and then to make sure that you have your PV green card in place with Green Solar. That would already give you a very good idea of what's going on. And from there, you can approach us and we will assist you with the designing and show you how to pitch to the customer and so forth.
Okay. Second question. There are a lot of solar module brands now in the market, but which ones are more reliable?
So if you log on to the Bloomberg NEF website, you'll find a graph that is called the Altman Z-score. If you have a look at the Altman Z-score, you'll see a list of about 40 different PV manufacturers. On the left-hand side, you'll see green bars. In the center, you'll see gray bars. On the right-hand side, you'll see red bars. That have got absolutely nothing to do with quality. That is literally the financial viability of these guys and Bloomberg's interpretation of whether they are going to be around in the next 25 years, as long as their warranties are for. And you'll notice that to the left-hand side, there are a lot of brands that you might not have heard of. And to the right-hand side, in the red zone, there are brands which you've heard of. But that's not an indicator of quality at all. So please don't be fooled and think that tier one means it's a tier one as in the best quality. It's more like the manufacturer is financially more stable than a different brand. So you need to look out for things like DECRA certification, IEC certification, and efficiency. So for example, there's a lot of solar models out there, but for example, if you look at a product like Enersol, they do individual flash testing of each module. The DECRA reports are available to show the efficiencies. You get the same for example, for DMEG. Jinko is also a very popular brand at the moment, where people don't have a lot of comebacks. So I'm not specifically aligned to any brand, but I do know that there are some brands in circulation at the moment which have got a lot of praise, which are actually not such good brands. So yeah, I would also try to steer away from brands which have not been in the country for long. So certain brands like Enersol, for example, have been in South Africa for 10 years, which is more than JA Solar, more than Jinko. Not saying JA Solar and Jinko are not good panels, but I would tend to stick with the one that's been around for the longest as one of the more reputable ones.
A good indicator is probably also those brands that are sold by the reputable distributors in South Africa. Like iseli and all the others have done their checks, I assume, and you offer brands that you can offer where you know warranty and quality is all right. We have one last question, and then we're also at the end. Clint is asking, who can he speak to if he wants to shadow a team that's doing commercial installations? Can you help him?
What I can do is I can drop my contact details, and you can get a hold of me, Clint. Send me an email or drop me a message tomorrow. So what I can do is I can find out where you're based, in which part of the country, and then we could hook you up with one of our current installers on a project, hear from them if they'll have an issue with you guys shadowing them, and you can see how it's done. So we have commercial installers right over the country. We have branches in Johannesburg, KwaZulu-Natal, Cape Town, and in the Free State, as well as Namibia. So if you're in any of those regions and the surrounding areas, you will most probably be able to get involved with the project reasonably quickly, and it will be very insightful.
Yeah, maybe you can drop your contacts in the chat now, but I will also include them in the follow-up email. So all of you who registered for this event will get an email with the contact details and with our next course dates, because we have a solar power designer commercial course coming up where we actually talk through all of this in detail, where we take the time to do calculation examples, speak through the theory, speak through what components are available, how to go about the planning, how to manage construction sites, how to use software tools to make your job a bit easier. And the next ones are scheduled for April in Johannesburg on 3rd to 5th of April next year, and the next one in Cape Town will be on 16th to 18th of April. Okay, then we are at the end. Thank you very much, Lionel. It was super, super interesting. Do you have one last piece of advice that you would like to give to the audience, anyone who wants to start out in the commercial sector?
Here's more of a motivational piece of advice. I would say do not give up. If at first you don't succeed, try and try again. In the commercial space, you tend to compete with a lot of large players. Some of them have been around for 10 plus years. So if you compete in the commercial space and you don't get the job and you've lost to somebody who's been in the industry for 10 years, don't think it's impossible to make it in the commercial space. It's definitely possible to make it in the commercial space. It's a numbers game. You need to make sure that you get enough quotes out. You need to visit enough customers. Then you will get the success. In the residential industry now, it's actually become worse. Now it's a very big numbers game because nobody's interested in it at the moment, purely because of whatever reason, finances, load shedding, whatever the case would be. And it's even worse. So, yeah, that's it from my side.
Thank you. Okay, then that's it. The next alumni meeting next year will definitely take place. We don't know the time and date yet, but you will get the invite in your email inboxes and also in our alumni WhatsApp and Telegram groups. We will inform you on time. All right, everyone.
Thank you for having me, Vivian.
Thanks, Lionel, for joining us, and thank you to our audience. And I wish you all a very happy December, very happy holiday time, and I'll see you in the new year. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.